I believe that an elite group of people and the corporations they run have gained control over not just our energy, food supply, education, and healthcare, but over virtually every aspect of our lives. And they do it by controlling the world of finance, not by creating more value, but by actually controlling the source of money. When I followed the money, I found that it took me up the levels of a pyramid. Here we are at the bottom level going about our daily lives. Above us is government, people who are given a monopoly on force and use it to tax and control us whether or not we agree. But who controls them? At the next level are the corporations. Many would say that it is now corporations and not nation states that rule the world. They call it a corporatocracy. To acquire the world's resources and control the markets, this corporatocracy must have access to cheap money. The big corporations get their loans at special rates from the big banks, which means that those who control the major banks, the moneyed elite, ultimately control the corporations. As I've followed the money, I've learned that almost everything I once believed about money is simply not true.
When we go into a bank and we ask for a loan of, say, $50,000, £50,000, what actually happens? You see, most people live their lives based on a kind of vague image of what happens. What actually happens is you ask for £50,000, they type into your account £50,000. That's all they do. They don't mint any coins, they don't print any money, they don't move any precious metal anywhere. They just put £50,000 into your account on a computer screen. From that moment, you start paying interest on money that has never, does not, and will never exist.
It turns out that banks actually have about 9 times as much money loaned out as they have on reserve in their vaults. This is possible because of what's referred to as fractional reserve lending. The way it works is that the Federal Reserve, or the central bank in any country, is legally allowed to determine the amount a bank must have on reserve. In the US, it's currently around 10%. So if you deposit $10,000 into the bank sets aside 10%, or $1,000, and then loans out the rest of your money. The way it works is, say another person comes into the bank and asks for a car loan of $9,000. At this moment, the bank loans out the $9,000 from your original deposit. It isn't there anymore. The borrower then pays the person selling the car, and they go deposit the money into another bank, which is part of the same central banking system. This $9,000 is treated as a new deposit, and the process continues. The money gets redeposited and reloaned until the initial deposit of $10,000 becomes $100,000. The banking system just created $90,000 by loaning out your money. Apparently it began with the goldsmiths in the 17th century when people were trading in gold. Gold was heavy to carry around, so people stored the actual metal in vaults and traded receipts instead. Those receipts were the first paper money. Since only a few people would withdraw their gold at any given time, the vault owners, basically the new bankers, began creating receipts for more metals than they actually held. They loaned out those receipts and charged interest on money, gold, that they didn't really have. That's how our so-called fractional reserve system was born. In this system, the bankers get to make up money out of nothing, while the rest of us have to work hard to earn it. It has created a modern form of serfdom where the mass of society is now working to pay off their debt to the banks.
How is money created? Where does it come from? Who benefits? And what purpose does it serve? For centuries, the mechanics of the monetary system have remained hidden from the prying eyes of the populace. Yet its impact, both on a national and international level, is perhaps unsurpassed. for it is the monetary system that provides the foundations for international dominance and national control. Today, as these very foundations are being shaken by crises, the need for open and honest dialogue on the future of the monetary system has never been greater.
This economic crisis is like a cancer. If you just wait and wait thinking this is going to go away, just like a cancer, it's going to grow and it's going to be too late. What I would say to everybody is get prepared. This is not a time right now to wishful thinking the government is going to sort things out. The governments don't rule the world. Goldman Sachs rules the world.
We're on the verge of a perfect storm.
In opposition lie corrupt and entrenched interests that lurk in the corridors of power, for whom there are no reasons to relinquish privileges they feel are justly deserved.
Has he got a reform plan for the NHS? No. Has he got a police reform plan? Has he got a plan to cut the deficit?
Order! Miss Order! Order!
Do you trust the government?
Try to calm down and behave like an adult, and if you can't, if it's beyond you, leave the chamber, get out, we'll manage without you.
The system is inherently unstable as a result of the international power it provides to the dominant parties. In 2010, the total UK money supply stood at £2.15 trillion. 2.6% of this total was physical cash, 53.5 billion. The rest, 2.1 trillion or 97.4% of the total money supply, was commercial bank money.
The 3% of money is created through the central bank, and that money essentially, if you created a £10 note, you could sell that to a bank to put into their ATM, and the bank would have to repay that £10 or buy it for £10. There'd be no interest charged on that money, but that money is then essentially transferred to the Treasury, and it's a form of fundraising for the government. It's called seigniorage.
When the Bank of England creates a £10 note, it costed about 3 or 4 pence to actually print that note, and it sells it to the high street banks at face value, so at £10. And the profit, the difference between printing the note and actually selling it for £10, goes directly to the Treasury. So in effect, all the profit that we get on creating physical money, banknotes, goes to the Treasury, and it reduces how much taxes we have to pay. Over the last 10 years, that's raised about £18 billion.
In 1948, notes and coins constituted 17% of the total money supply. This was one contributing factor in the government's ability to finance post-war reconstruction. This included the establishment of the NHS. In only 60 years, notes and coins have shrunk to less than 3%. Prior to 1844, banknotes were created by private banks, and the government did not profit from their creation.
Pre-industrialisation, there was multiple forms of money coexisting, and so the kind of rise of government-sponsored fiat money is a relatively recent phenomenon.
In the 1840s, there was no law to stop banks from creating their own banknotes, so they used to issue paper notes as kind of a representative of what you had in the bank account. Instead of you taking your heavy metal coins out of the bank and then going and paying somebody with them, you could get your paper which said how much money you had in the bank, and you could give that to somebody and they could use that to go and get the heavy metal coins from the bank. Now over time, these paper notes became as good as money. People would use the paper notes instead of going and getting the real money from the bank. And obviously, as soon as the banks realised that what they were creating had become, the dominant type of money in the economy, they realized that by creating more of it, they could generate profits. You know, they can just print up some new notes, lend it, and get the interest on top of that. And they did that, you know, up until the 1840s. In the 1840s, they pushed it just a little bit too far, and that caused inflation. It destabilized the economy. So in 1844, the Conservative government of Robert Peel actually passed a law that took the power to create money away from the commercial banks and brought it back to the state. So since then, the Bank of England has been the only organisation authorised to create paper notes. Since then, everything's gone digital. And what we now use as money is the digital numbers that commercial banks can create out of nothing.
Under this fractional reserve scheme, we inevitably become debt slaves to a ruling class of financial elite, not because they are better or smarter than anyone else, but because they have rigged the system to benefit themselves at the expense of most people on the planet. So how come if you or I make up money, it's called counterfeiting, but if the banks do it, it's increasing the money supply? How did the banks get this power? This is Jekyll Island, where in 1910, representatives from the Rockefellers, Rothschilds, Morgans, and other private bankers gathered secretly to draft the legislation that would create the Federal Reserve. Ed Griffin literally wrote the book on what happened at Jekyll Island.
Central banks are banking cartels which have gone into partnership with the respective governments in the countries where they operate. And they've been given monopolistic power over the creation of the nation's money supply. That's what the politicians handed to them as a gift, you might say, for the partnership. Now, in return, what did the bankers do for the politicians? They promised to create money out of nothing, now that they've got this legal power to do it anytime the government needs it.
And since 2008, we've witnessed the greatest fake money printing run in recorded history. This financial sleight of hand disguises the costs, hides who's to blame, and leaves us as debt slaves working to pay off the bill. I found it revealing that in the same year the Federal Reserve was founded, 1913, the Internal Revenue Service was also established. An income tax was then instigated so you and I would have to pay the politicians' debt plus interest to the bankers.
What is the proper relationship, what should be the proper relationship between a chairman of the Fed and a president of the United States?
Well, first of all, the Federal Reserve is an independent agency, and that means basically that there is no other agency of government which can overrule actions that we take.
On the advice of counsel, I invoke my Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination and respectfully decline to answer your question.
Sir, is it true you were a crack cocaine dealer for 7 years? I plead the Fifth.
You couldn't wait to come educate the members of Congress on drug pricing, and this would be a great opportunity to do it. So do you understand you can waive your Fifth Amendment right?
On the advice of counsel, I invoke my Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination and respectfully decline to answer your question.
Do you think you've done anything wrong?
On the advice of counsel, I invoke my Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination and respectfully decline to answer your question.
Sir, will you tell us about the cartels you dealt with in your time as a crack cocaine dealer?
No, but I can tell you that I plead the Fifth. So many amendments in the Constitution of the United States of America. I can only choose one. I can only choose one. I plead the Fifth.
On the advice of counsel, I invoke my Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination and respectfully decline to answer your question.
2, 3, 4, 5. Anything you say, 5. Go ahead, ask me a question.
Did you?
That'll be all, sir. Good afternoon. I got your sentence reduced to a month, buddy.
Oh!
I know you're smiling, but I'm very serious, sir.
It's your intention to decline all answers to the questions and invoke your Fifth Amendment right?
Yes.